Welcome to Zero Love, that podcast that dives deep into the heart of the sports world with the most fascinating people in the game. From coaches to athletes to executives to innovators, we bring you their stories, their grit, and their passion that defines sport at its core. And today we bring you Vincent Burrell, the man behind Equip Sport, the self-service locker rental company that strategically places these lockers in public areas so that people will have access to premium sports equipment that they otherwise would have never had without spending a lot of money and losing a lot of time. But what's really interesting is everything that goes behind what sounds like such a simple idea and how to get this business running, all the other things that they have to do, the use that they make of their data to give to local cities, to marketers as well. It's an incredible story that I could have talked for hours with Vincent, but I had to stop myself short at some point. So I hope you enjoyed today's podcast. I'm JY Obone. Let's get into Zero Love. All right, Vincent, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Joining us in Switzerland right now, right?
That's right. I'm typically based out of the US in Florida, but I spend quite a bit of time here in Switzerland where Equip is most of the team is based. We started off in Europe and are growing now in North America as well.
That's awesome. It's been really cool to learn. We had a conversation a couple weeks ago just as an introduction. And for me, I've just learned that I get so much more excited about things after I hear about them. The young mindset of mine, judging a book by its cover, right? But then just in speaking to you and everything behind it and what you guys are trying to do, I think it's amazing. And, and before we get into it, I have to congratulate you guys for the award you guys just won, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we just last Thursday, we won the London Sports Awards for Best Tech Innovation. We're definitely honored to have received the award. For us, it was great to get the recognition for innovation, but more importantly, the award is also about meaningful impact. And for us, that is kind of our vision and mission of removing barriers to sport.
Yeah, well, and so let's get started from the beginning as to how you started to try to remove these barriers. The idea of how the locker rental companies, and if you have a better description, say it. But having a locker that is placed next to athletic fields, right, and with the use of an app, you can go in, and depending on where you are, you have certain types of equipment. You have the app downloaded, you scan it, the locker opens, you get the equipment, you use it, you put it back, you're done. Simple?
That's right. It's pretty simple. Good way of explaining it.
So, how did that get started? Because, I hate to almost downplay it, but I guess this is a lot of great ideas afterwards. It seems like that, right? Where you look at it, and my first thought was like, yeah, why hasn't this been done before? And I haven't even seen anybody, at least in the United States, even try it and fail, right? It's just you always have that shop, you go in, you have to pay for the rental equipment, or there's just nothing at all. And here's this with technology and everything. How did this get started? Because it sounds so simple, but I don't imagine it to be simple to get there. Because if not, somebody else would have done it.
It's an interesting thing, and I think like anything in innovation, it's rarely a straight line path, and it often comes with some gut feeling, intuition, something you're not always very good at explaining or describing as to why you think it is a good idea. And often good ideas at the beginning are shot down, and people say, "What would you want to do that?" And there's so many examples of this, right? And it's like, why would you ever want to buy a book online? Why don't you go to the bookstore? And for us, I think it came from a number of things. So Equip is a spin-off of the Niedicker Group. The Niedicker Group has been around for more than 100 years, 135 years, I think, at this point. They started off by making farming equipment, wooden farming equipment back then, and they had to reinvent themselves over and over again. And it always came from a necessity of survival, right? And so there's this just general environment where, you got to constantly think outside of the box and think that, tomorrow might be your last day. The other part is just a general sense of the world and being in tune with the world we live in. And if you combine those two things kind of came into play. One was Nidecker is now into action sports, snow sports, snowboards. And, winters are getting shorter. People might go skiing for a week, maybe for 2 weeks if they're lucky, maybe just a weekend. And then you're like, who's going to buy? Most people just want access to the skis when they want to ski. And then the rest of the time, they don't want the burden of having to store them and then do the maintenance before they go for the next season. And so the idea was to say that the model is broken at the base, and so we need to find a better way of giving access to sport. Of course, skiing, snowboarding are not the easiest sport to just kind of pick up and go, and so it evolved from there of saying, there must be places where this can be simpler. The other observation is, and I think it came from everyday experiences, which is, when was the last time or maybe you never even bought a CD or a record, right? And you just you pick it up when you want to listen to a song, you open, whatever your favorite music store, and you just stream it in real time. Same with movies. You're like, oh, I'd love to watch this movie tonight. And you just kind of go and do it. The days where you go to Blockbuster, take your car, go there, find the thing. Oh, it's already rented. Shit, I can't get it. And go through this process. So the idea of access over ownership is becoming more and more pervasive in community today. And I think you combine those two things and you kind of go, gee, why would I want to have a soccer ball at home? Because I only use it on the soccer field. Why would I want a basketball in my closet if I only use it on the basketball court? Same with any sport you can imagine. And there's some sports which are more hassle than others, right? You could say a ball easy enough to carry around. If I talk about a bigger equipment, something that requires bigger upfront investment, then the notion of ownership is even bigger. But I think today we live in a world where any friction we can remove is embraced, and especially when you now add another layer, which is people living in cities. 50% of the world population lives in cities, and it's only going to grow. I think in the next 30 years, it's like 75 or 80% of the world is going to live in cities. And we all know if you live in a city, you don't have much space. And so you're not going to want to store this stuff. You don't want to lug it around all day between, either you're going to school or going to work or just walking around. You don't want to carry those things. No one owns a bike today. If you go to New York City, you're better off taking a bike share than owning a bike. You need to carry it up the stairs or store it somewhere, get it stolen. So when you put all of those things together, you're like, duh, who would want to own a ball? Just have the ball when you want to use it and return it when you're done. So I think sometimes if you go back to the inception, a lot of people looked at it and go, why would you ever want to do that? And then when you start to experience it, then people go, why would you ever want to do it any other way? And I still remember 15 years ago when people were like, I don't want to stream a music. This is my song. I want to own it. I want to have the DVD or the CD on my bookshelf. And then you're like, who wants to have a CD on their bookshelf? So like you said, sometimes it's a question of timing, and when it's there, people don't even question it anymore. And I think we're getting close to that point. We still frequently get the question as to why would you want to do it? And then people think about it for a minute and they go, you're right. Why would I ever want to carry my soccer ball with me?
Yeah. And I think as I've gotten older, family, house, storage, all that stuff makes so much more sense than ever before. I'm going through a process where I have to move right now, right? And, I have a garage in my house, and, a couple of years ago, I bought a gym and put it in my house because I just didn't want to have the hassle of going to the gym. And, I wanted to spend all the extra time I could in the house, not driving around so I could be with my family. And now I'm selling the house, moving to a bigger city. I have less space. I looked at the cost of a storage unit to leave my gym in there. And I'm like, it's going to be more expensive than all the money I've saved over the past few years. And I'm like, gym membership, sell the gym, right? Forget the ownership. I want the access because I don't have the storage. and then the other part too was, I'd mentioned this to you, but in my neighborhood, where one of the houses has that basketball hoop, and I'm not going to buy a basketball hoop. At the time, I had a 1-year-old, but once he saw it and he saw the ball and he saw that every day he could go there, grab the ball and just bounce it. Then after 5-10 minutes, like, he would leave, but every day we went outside, he knew he could go somewhere and play, and I don't have to pay for it. So thank you to the neighbors, and then I don't have to worry about storage or anything else like that. And so then, as I've gotten older and experienced a lot more of this, just opportunities to accumulate or just get the access and make those decisions. On the one hand, I've seen the good side of it, and the other side, when I've accumulated stuff, it's like, well, now, like, I have less space. What do I do with it? And I just never thought about it in those terms that you put it, access versus ownership. And
Yep.
so it makes me think then what you're going to do towards these communities that, I hate to even put it this way, but they don't have access to sports as much, that maybe don't have the funds to buy this stuff. I'm fortunate enough to have bought a tennis racket for my son, even though he had never played, right? So a lot of families will wait for their child to try it, and then they'll see if it's worth it or not. But if not, like, I don't know of a single place I've been to with a public tennis court that has a racket for a 2-year-old kid. And so you're going to start to provide this stuff. And so, I mean, when I think about how you're going to just change lives for families, for kids, and everything, I mean, was that part of your intention when it came about? Like, wow, what we're going to be able to do with providing stuff, or was it just like simple solution? And then as you built it out, you saw like where it could grow to?
I think there's always a sense that, it it could have a major impact, but I think the more you go down the path, it starts with a simple thing, and then the more you get into it, the more you realize that the impact you can have is much greater than you initially thought. And like I said at the beginning, it's you have kind of a hunch at the beginning, you have a conviction behind something, but then, as you go through the process, there are many things that happen that kind of push you one way and the other, and you go through the meander of iterating and learning and hearing what people say. We didn't start in cities. We started making, putting one box in one place. And then, we were like, should we maintain this box or should we work with the distributor? What is the right sports? Where do we do it? And so you go through all of this learning. And as we do this, we realize that it is serving multiple purposes. You could have, I'm an addict runner. You go running, you're doing it, whatever, 3-4 times a week. And maybe when you go running, you're like, I want to do a bit of fitness, halfway through. And now we put fitness equipment in the middle of parks, and people are like, this is great. I've got some weights, I've got some bands, I've got some other things, and I get to mix it in. That was never the intention at the beginning. We never thought about it this way. And these are people that do it 3 or 4 times a week. And then on the other side, you have tourists who will come to London. And of course, they're not traveling with their sports equipment. Maybe they have their sneakers. And then they go, oh, so cool. We get to play, a game of basketball. It's there, the ball's there, and we get to enjoy it, right? And so when we started to do this, we started to hear people's stories, and you're like, that's right, it works for this case, and it also works for this case. And you talked about your son, like parents go to the park, they're already like the stroller, the bags, the this, the that. You're like, do I really want to take one ball, let alone 2 or 3 different piece of equipment? Because your kid is going to play 5 minutes of soccer, and then you're going to be like, I want to go and do this one now, and I want to do, and it's all there wherever you are, right? So I think this idea of access cannot be overlooked. We really live in a world where we are accustomed to having this easy access and friction, and people are embrace it. We do zero marketing. We just place the boxes. That's all we do. We haven't spent $1 on marketing anywhere. And that was the big trigger for us. We're like, if we put it there and people use it, then we know we're onto something. And that's exactly what happened. We just had to place the box in the place where people go. And then it started happening.
It's funny you mentioned the different sports. We're carrying all this stuff, the strollers and everything. And yesterday I went to go play tennis with my son, and we got past the 5-minute mark. We can get to 30 minutes to sometimes an hour. And but still, I mean, if it's 30 minutes, gosh, to get out of the house and do all that for only 25, 30 minutes. So I go to this one court because there's a little kids playground right next to the court in case as soon as he gets bored, boom, just walk over. And because I just don't want to carry this stuff. I know, like we have a soccer ball, we have a basketball. We could bring all this up. I can't. I'm by myself. I can't take all that stuff. I have to take the tennis balls already. So yeah, it's you know, it totally hits the spot, and that's what I'm saying. With the experience I've gotten as older, maybe as I was younger, I wouldn't appreciate it, but now as a parent, definitely appreciate your product so much more. But did you have any challenges when you first started to put this together? Like, did you find out any sports were like, whoa, that's not going to work at all?
Um, it was super easy. Everything worked from the get-go, and we just had a slam dunk. No, I'm joking.
I was going to
We
say,
had
I
plenty
mean,
of issues.
yeah.
It sounds simple, but the reality is rarely that simple. You know, from simple mechanical issues to, you know, at the beginning, and people say it all the time, right? You do a lot of things that don't scale, and you're like, oh gosh, I'm doing it once. I would never do it twice or 10 times. But this is how you learn, right? And so you try things, you iterate, you learn, and that's part of the process. And things that you expect to be hard turned out to be simple, and things that you didn't even think about turned out to be the biggest hassle. Um, so I think that's just the name of the game. In the end, I think we landed on something. The mantra was always to keep it simple. It was not to get in the way and make it as accessible as possible. We had many questions, worries. Are people going to use it? Are people going to steal everything from the box and then we're left with nothing? How do we control that?
Did
So
they?
theft was probably, well, theft was definitely top of mind. And I can tell you when we started, you know, you have one or two boxes, you're like, okay, it's fine. And then you go with bigger equipment. So we do more than 20 different sports. We do also like kayaks and stand-up paddles, which are bigger, they're more valuable. And so you're like, what's going to happen? These worked out okay. I think, you know, you have then soccer balls, and then one day one is missing. And so as we started to scale, we're like, well, we better put that under control, because if they all go disappearing, then it's going to be a real problem. And so when we launched in Paris last summer for the Olympics, that was a huge worry, because we're like, okay, like Paris is a big city, you know, like we don't know how it's going to go. And we had planned like we're going to lose everything within a week. Um, but we put a lot of good effort into thinking through that one and making sure that we could keep it low. And it boiled down to simple things. You know, you have to meet people with trust. And I think if you design the service, if you do it in a way where, you know, this is really about offering access with a positive intent, and you put that on the consumer's hands of saying, you know, you are also responsible of that ecosystem. And the whole point of what we're doing is about sharing, right? And you can imagine that if 1 minute it's a 2-year-old kicking the ball, and the next is a group of teens, and then it's you know, someone else, you're all living in that same community. So trying to build this really strong community feeling was important. And what we did was, in every place where we set up our hubs, which are like 30 or more stations inside of a city, we always find one person that manages the hub, right? And is the leader. And they're from the community. So we find someone who's local. Um, and and it's about education. It's about smart design in the way that we've designed. So you take a picture before and after you use the equipment to show that it's back in the box. So like simple things. The last thing we want is to force, you know, put like credit card charges up front and things like that, because we think this goes against our vision of really promoting access, removing barriers, making inclusive environment, and really building this strong community. So today, theft or missing equipment, because sometimes you do kick the ball and it goes over the fence and you can't go and get it. So I wouldn't say it's 100% theft. We have about 1% of sessions that have equipment disappearing. So you can think about it in this way. Every 100 days, we have one equipment that goes missing,
That's
right?
amazing.
And so I can tell you that after 100 days of use, the equipment needs changing for the most part. And so that's where we try and keep it.
And how, yeah, how do you manage that quality of the product, right, as it gets used, wearing it down? Is that community person coming in, checking it out, and then giving you feedback?
Yeah, so we've at first it was, definitely not scalable. We were going there very frequently, going, checking. We would look at the pictures that were uploaded. And you have a handful of boxes and it's okay. And then you start having, 30, 50, 100, then you multiply that by multiple times use per day. You're getting to tens of thousands of sessions that you're like trying to track and figure out what's going on and so on. Um, and we started to really digitize the experience to the point where everything is monitored remotely. We do a full maintenance service. So the stations get visited and maintained on a regular basis, but we get real-time logs. So we know when equipment needs to get replaced. The community participates. So if you use a piece of equipment, you're like, hey, the ball is a bit deflated or it's getting used, this gets added to our log, and then it goes into our queue, and the people who are doing the maintenance on the field see it, and then they automatically get a route of, hey, you need to go and visit this station, this is what you need to go and replace it and service it, and so on and so forth. And then we also work with our partners. So in Paris, Decathlon is our partner, and we also provide feedback. And actually, for them, that was also one of the interesting things. Decathlon is really trying to promote circularity and the idea of having a more durable environment and equipment. And so for them, usually they sell a piece of equipment. They don't know how much abuse it can get. They do their test, but in real life, how much feedback do you get? Whereas there, we can tell them, look, after 30 days, this ball just gone. That it's so worn out that it doesn't work. And so for them, it's also good feedback and interest. So um, the level of data, and we've been talking a lot about sports and the access, but what Equip offers is a massive data pool that can be leveraged to actually make better decision at the city level, make better decision on the equipment manufacturers level, and also obviously data and understanding trends, which sports, who's playing, what age, what time of day, which day of the week, why certain neighborhoods are more active than others, and so on and so forth.
And I imagine with that data piece, that again, that was one of those things that wasn't on the front part of getting the business started. You just started working and then it just rolled out, and then you're like, whoa, look what we're coming up on. And
Yeah, I think that we knew that the data could be a big thing, but until you get volume, it it doesn't matter. And so at first you're like so focused on saying, are we building something that people care about and want to use? And then when people start using it, then you start looking at the data because it becomes interesting and you're like, oh, look, this reservation and this one and this one and that one. And then the more you look into it, the more you study it, the more you understand, and it reveals things to you. And then you really start to comprehend the power. And we really started to see it when when we started to share it outside, because we share it with the cities, and the number of questions they look at the data and then they have 20 more questions, which are very interesting because in the end you realize that they were like clueless about what was happening in their cities in terms of everyone's most of the major cities in the world have signed up to the sustainability goal of the UN, and none of them had data to understand how they could create more active or inclusive communities, right? They could measure maybe CO2 emissions. There are many things they could do, but sport was one of those things where they're like, okay, we have so many parks and we have so many public facilities and so on. Are people using them? Do people care? And so that data becomes really valuable for them in this way. We also, and I mentioned this to you last time, but we also work with sponsors. And so the beauty of the Equip solution is sponsors get to sponsor the solution, which gives free access to the equipment. So in most cases, we try and place the equipment free of access to the population. And for the sponsor, the beauty of the data is obviously they get to see a direct, real ROI on their investment in terms of brand visibility, player engagement, and so on and so forth. And so the data is interesting because we're sitting at the heart of this public-private partnership and the community, and everyone benefits from the data that we're able to gather. The sponsors on one side, the city, we do, and the players, because with this data, we get to create more tailored experiences for them that meet their needs.
So with that sponsor locker, so let's just say Zero Love comes in, sponsors an entire locker. That means anybody that comes into that locker, they have the app, but they can scan it just to register and keep track of things. But they get the equipment for free because I've sponsored that, and the cost is taken care of.
That's
Is
right.
that right?
Exactly.
That's incredible. I mean, that's an amazing opportunity, especially because then they'll see, oh gosh, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of those it's one of those things where if you can bring those parties to the table in the right way, it really unlocks power. And today, I think there's been a growing, you hear a lot about people talking about authentic marketing, about, how do you do good? And businesses are trying to readapt themselves in having a true purpose. And actually, the younger generations now want to join companies that have a positive purpose on the planet, on the community, and so on. I think by doing what we do, what we're seeing is actually that really resonates. And more companies that are doing sponsorship, that are doing marketing, they go, okay, like I want performance, but I want my brand to perform in an environment that is synonymous with what I'm trying to leave as a legacy as well. And we're doing it in such a seamless way. You don't need to create the environment because we're on the sports field. And so anyone that gets to a sports field knows the feeling. I'm going to go and play basketball. I'm going to share this moment, this intense moment of emotions and joy and sweat and all of that. You don't need to create the ad that you're going to pay, hundreds of thousands of dollars to. It's there. You're living it, right? So I don't need to try in 30 seconds to bring you to that level. And then everything else is just kind of falls into play. Um, so I think that model resonates with quite a few brands that are active today, and Decathlon is one of them for sure. But there are many more that we're working with now.
Well, and what was it like? Because I imagine these lockers are not all one size, right? Depending on where you place it and the equipment you have in it, it's a different size box, right?
We have two different formats actually, and we try to keep it simple because it'd be easy to have 50 different formats.
That's what I was
But
going to
we've
wonder.
designed we designed one station that we call multi-sport, which covers the majority of urban sports, whether it's racket sports, ball sports, fitness, you name it. And that one is kind of a rectangular box in which we can adapt the insides to and the door opening or the locker opening so that you can have access to different formats of equipment. And then we have a large size box, which is more like a container, in which we can put kayaks or paddle boards, like bigger pieces of equipment. And these we use mostly for watercrafts.
Okay, so just two boxes.
Two boxes.
I,
That's right.
I, I wonder how much trial and error there was to find the right size boxes to not have 50, because I can imagine it being easy to have 50, but then that's very inefficient.
Yeah, yeah. I think, we started with the most popular sports and then we tried to fit other things in there. So we started with ball sports, basketball, soccer, most popular mainstream sports. And we said, hey, we don't want to just put one ball, we want to do more. And then you have, you're like, okay, so our main box can hold three balls. And then you're like, can we put rackets in there? And you're like, yeah, if we change the doors, you could put the rackets and you could do two sets of two. Oh, great, we can do that. And then you're like, oh, can we? And that's how it kind of evolved. We didn't start with the mantra of saying, okay, like how can we fit 50 different sports uh, in that one box?
And you mentioned this earlier, but it sticks out to me because every time I went to Europe, I would see this, and I wish we had more of this in the United States. Which is, did you say like in some of these lockers you have actual fitness equipment?
That's right. Yeah.
because in Europe, what I loved that I saw, but then it just like, not quite enough for me. That I needed a little bit more. Those they have these great little parks where you have a lot of stuff where you can do some pull ups, some dips, and it's all body weight stuff. But I'm like, it's also a little limited, right? You can only do so much with machines like that. And I always wanted a little bit more, so I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to pay the €10, just go to the gym down the road, and but I would love to be outside. That'd be amazing. So, but now with your lockers, you can offer almost like a so much better of a workout now at those places. So, are you placing them around those parks?
Yeah, exactly. That's where you would find them. If you go running in Paris, you'll see them in London and other places.
Then I know you're starting to get into the U.S., so I don't know if you've crossed this bridge yet, but I wonder because those almost they just don't really exist in the United States, and it's just all gyms everywhere. And I just wish there was more of that stuff. Have you guys looked into those types of like places in the U.S.?
Yeah, we're starting to look at it. You know, the way we approach it is we very much tap into public infrastructure, right? We want to give access. We also work in private spaces, uh, but the majority of our focus is public infrastructure. So we work with the cities. Any place where we go, we will do a full mapping, meaning we analyze the whole surface area of the city to understand where are all the places people are practicing sports, whether they're structured fields or open fields or any other spot that we know people are practicing sports or doing outdoor fitness. And we map all of those. We identify for each spot what sports are most likely to be played on those. And some of them it's very obvious. You know, if I go on a basketball court, then it's going to be basketball. But some of them are multi sports. We map all of those. Then we also use local data and understanding what are the latest trends in terms of what youth are playing in terms of sports. And then we overlay this data, and then we kind of define, okay, these are the sports, these are the locations, you know, and every city will have hotspots, you know, like iconic places where people go and hang out and take pictures and so on. So we mix all of those things. For us, it's all about visibility, foot traffic, and accessibility, right? And if you put it in those right places, you can get the perfect mix where again, it just happens. We don't do marketing. The work we do is upstream. Once we roll it out, we're pretty much guaranteed that the solution will get pick up. And then we start measuring what happens. So after the first day, we start seeing uses. After a week, we start seeing use. After 30 days, we have a pretty good picture of what's happening, and we'll adapt. We'll say, okay, like this location, maybe this is not the right sport, or it's not the right location, and we'll move the stations. So the stations are fixed, but we'll adapt them. We really are focused on engagement. We want to have maximum use. We want the community to be, using the station. In some cases, we're like, wow, there's so much use on this station. We need to put a second one because there's a lot of activity here. And so we'll mix and match and move things around with just like you would, I think, with any, I guess, digital application, website. You're trying to maximize your traffic and engagement, and we really kind of operate in that way. We think that that's what brings the most value to all the parties involved. Again, the city wants to see maximum community engagement, the sponsors wants to see maximum engagement, and we want to see maximum use and visibility for the stations.
And what's been your experience? I wonder how much you've had to go into racket sports and specifically tennis, because I'm a big tennis guy. But because also in Europe versus United States, a big thing is in Europe, there's not as many public tennis facilities that someone can just walk in. Like where I went yesterday, it's just 4 courts right there. You walk in. Europe, it's a lot more private. So how much have you gone into the racket side of things and especially tennis?
You know, it's interesting. I think it depends on the regions. And obviously, I'm here in Switzerland. Switzerland tennis is pretty popular, thanks to many good players, including Federer. We've always had a lot of courts everywhere, and so we are present on tennis courts. Paddle tennis is also picking up, like pickleball in the US, squash and other places. So they're a mix of private and public. So that's where we work with both. We're also in London. We're in the Wimbledon area, and so there, of course, the whole borough of Merton has a lot of tennis courts, and some of them are community based. So they're like, if you live in the community, you have the access key to the courts, and so people can use them. And some of them are 100% public. And if you walk around Wimbledon, you'll see them.
And what's it been like with tennis? Because that can be a little tricky, though. I have an idea, but I'd love to, before I even jump in, I wonder if you've even thought about it yet. What's it been like getting into tennis with rackets? Because the string tensions, they can lose tension quicker. Grips can wear out quicker. Basketball, you can kind of leave it there for a month or two. It's probably going to be just fine.
Yeah, I think racket sports definitely require a bit more attention. No doubts about it. It's also one of those sports where I think traditionally everyone has their own equipment. Uh, you get into tennis, and tennis is not one that you just kind of play one day in the year and put the racket away. Or so um, it has a different dynamic than soccer or basketball, where it has a much wider use. And so we're still playing with it. We're still adapting. I think we're seeing what type of racket works better, how frequently we need to change the balls. We're still learning. This is early days for us on the tennis front.
Yeah,
But
it's
I'm
I've been
curious
kind
to
of
hear your thoughts as an
well.
expert.
Look, I mean, clearly you've thought of so much, so you've probably thought about this. But I wondered, based on age of a player and level, you have just certain general types of rackets that you're probably going to use. So, I mean, you just have like 5, 6 different ones, and there's a way you can string them in a certain type of string that you can put in where the tension lasts significantly longer. And there's certain balls that they last longer than other ones. So,
Yep.
you could just have those 5 general rackets. And then, if they're starting to play more and more, they're going to want to end up buying their own racket. But I wonder, you guys have probably thought about that though. I'm sure you've.
Yeah, I think all of those are important considerations. And then I think the environment plays such a big role. Like that's why I think we love the idea of working in the Wimbledon area, because there's such a strong tennis community and mentality of uh, um, because the sport is so close to home there. And that's where it's interesting. We'll have way more tennis stations in an area like this, and then you move to another part of town, and it's another sports. And so we'll really adapt to the community, and then listen and learn and iterate. And so I think some of the points you're making are definitely things we're still iterating with and learning with the same mindset. How do we maximize people's engagement with sport?
Yeah, pickle and pedal probably so much easier, right? I mean, just there's no strings, there's no tension, the balls last longer.
Yeah, actually, paddle the balls you need to replace quite often. So that's
Yeah,
one where the balls need to be replaced quite frequently. But what we see is a different dynamic and a different type of player, because pickleball or paddle, people will just try it. They're like, "Oh, I heard it's fun," and tennis is one of those. It's a tough sport, right? And so I think it takes a bit more getting into it. And that's why we like to work, even on you go to tennis clubs, you can always rent rackets and people do, right? And so I think you got to find the right environment where tennis is part of the culture, and then it just works.
yeah, that's my frustrating part with tennis is that it's a very difficult sport to get started, and you need a lot of reps, you need a little bit of coaching, and then sometimes then you look at the cost to even get started that one time. That's why I love like if your idea could come in and they could just try it at such a low cost, very almost no commitment. They put the racket back in the locker. If not, you have to go to a pro shop or a club and rent it, and then you have to pay for a ball machine or pay for the court as well. I mean, we have a bunch of courts that are around here that are just free, and that in the United States, that's pretty,
It's very
standard.
common. Yeah.
Yeah, to find those just free courts, but then there's no rackets, there's no balls, so it's like, gosh, I have to spend $40 just to play tennis for the first time, and you're probably going to be terrible. So then you're
Yep.
like, I'm not going to spend 40 again, but if I spend five, okay, I'll spend five, 8, 10 times, and get a little
Yeah.
bit better. So it's my, but that's why I also see like why pickleball and padel is growing so fast. There's an ease to it that you can get in a little bit easier. The access to it is a little simpler, though. Padel can be expensive, so to rent the courts. But to at least try it for a first time, you're going to feel better about yourself than tennis. I saw a quick story. Hopefully, I'm not going too long, and then I'll just have one more question. But a couple of months ago, I was giving a lesson. See 3 ladies come play on the court next to me. First time, clearly, first time playing tennis ever, and I'll just say they did not look like the most athletic people that have ever played. And they only came on the court with 3 tennis balls. The second shot they hit went straight over the fence, just like baseball, a home run. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And then so now they're down to 2. Well, it's only a matter of time before the second one goes. So now neither of them's playing, and they have 1 ball, and they're chasing it from just goes in the net. They hit 1 shot, and then they have to walk. Then they get it, and they hit maybe 2 shots, and then the other one gets mad at the other one because they can't control it. And I'm just like, it's just that hard of a sport, especially if you're not like a really good athlete and have no experience with racket sports. And here you come, there's this really healthy sport, and you try it, and you're like, I just bought this new little racket, or I rented it, and I have to take the time and drop it off. 3 balls went over the fence. I spent $10 on those balls. This sport sucks. And I'm just like, I get it. And then they go grab a pickleball and they just hit it over it, and they feel pretty good pretty quick. And they never have to replace that paddle for a long time, and the ball stays good for a while too. So that story, I'll never forget it. But it reminds me of my appreciation of like, what can we do to make things easier for people to get into tennis? If not, look, at least you're playing something, getting outside. But just my little story there. But I want to finish up with this one question. And the first comment is it's amazing how simplistic of an idea it is, but then the amount of thought behind it to make the entire business work. It's actually, I love listening to everything that goes into just one little locker, some balls, a field. It's so much more than that you guys are working on. It's amazing. But what would you say has been the most intense challenge of getting this up and running and keeping it going? You mentioned theft, but getting it started, placing in certain locations, what's been the most intense thing?
I think it goes back to what you just said, which is there's a lot that goes into building a business. And so it's the accumulation of all of those things, right? Individually, they're all manageable. Individually, you can all do it. The reality is you're a small team. Sometimes you're 1, you're 2, and then maybe you're 3 and you're 4, but you always have work for way more than you can chew. And so I think the biggest challenge is always, making sure you're focused on what's most important at the moment you're in, because sometimes it's easy to get focused on the wrong things, and they may be relevant at some point, but maybe they're not the most crucial thing. So making sure you're always focused on what matters most in the moment. And then the setbacks, like there's always something that is not going to go the way you want at the moment. You really could use a little push, and just you know keep pushing in those hard moments. And I think that's, since we're talking about sport, I've done a lot of sports myself, and I always say, like, running or any sports you do is like a rehearsal for life. You go through all of those emotions. You go from feeling great to the little doubt to the, oh, this is getting hard, to I feel great again. And a startup is kind of like that every day, multiple times a day, and you got to ride the highs and the lows. And the thing that gets you through is the conviction that you're doing something meaningful and impactful.
So I'm going to dig a little deeper, because you said something, but I got to know, because for me, I look at this idea and I'm like, I don't see right now how it fails. It just seems like a brilliant idea. It's just a matter of executing it, getting it done, and not making too many mistakes, right? So, but what's one of those setbacks? You talked about setbacks. What's one that set you back in a way where you're like you lost some sleep at night, like it just stressed you out?
Oh yeah, yeah. I won't put names, but we had a great deal. Everything was good. We were ready to launch, and the day before, the deal got canceled for reasons we out of our control. And then you're just kind of back to the drawing boards of going, okay, we thought we we had everything buttoned up and ready to go, and you have to go back to. I mean, it's happened so many times. We were working with a city, and then everything was good, everyone loved it, and then we get an email and they say no, it got declined, and you're like, how could that be? You know,
Yeah,
like
why?
every why, and you get no answers, and you know, I think it's life, you know, it's a question of perseverance. And those setbacks come at any point. You never know when they're going to come. And sometimes you got to know when to walk around it and when to push through. And I think these are the things, you know, you say it's like operations. You're like, oh, okay, we're going to get those. And then you realize the shipping was wrong and it's delayed by more time than you expected, which, you know, screws up everything else you had and the resources you had planned. And so I always make the parallel of startups and flying a plane at very low altitude. You know, like you're going very fast, you don't have much clearance, and you got to keep eye on the horizon, even when you're trying to fix the wing and, you know, keep the engine running and make sure that you get some sleep in the middle.
And this is a problem of mine because I get so curious with everything, somebody says. But, we had talked before, this wasn't your first startup, right? You had done some other stuff. So
Yeah,
even with that experience, you still can't predict when the setbacks will happen. You think you've thought of everything, and then these things happen that you just can't prepare for.
that's right. You know, it's like sport, right? You said you practice sport, you're like getting everything perfect, you feel really good for the tournament, and then you get into your first set and you're like, it doesn't feel the same way as yesterday or the day before when I thought I was all in. And then you just got to get your head back into the game and get overhead, right? And so I think you train as much as you can, you do all of the right things, but then, you know, life gets in the way sometimes. And the difference between getting through and not, experience definitely plays a role in the sense that you're like, okay, I've lived through this once and I survived, you know, like I know how to handle this, or, you know, like you don't stress maybe in the same way that you might the first time around. Sometimes you know too much, and sometimes it's better not to know what may come your way, because otherwise you wouldn't even start, right? So I think it's a mix of those things. But yeah, I really think that, you know, sport teaches you so much in terms of dealing with life in general and startups. And you know, for Equip being a sports tech company, the analogy is very simple, and the whole team is into sports, and that's how we kind of get we blow the steam.
Awesome. Well, Vincent, thank you so much for your time. Been so amazing to, learn so much more about Equip and hear it from the business side of stuff and everything you've had to do. And I can't wait till you grow in the United States, because I'm for sure going to be there with my son trying to find something there to use.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a blast, and yeah, look forward to rolling Equip in the US very soon.
Sounds great. Thanks.
Bye bye.